rough, and it takes all that you've got, but he's been here, just waiting for you to knock, to take his hand and plant your feet on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock.
Hi, welcome to Life on the Rock. Tonight our guest is JonMarc and Theresa Grodi, and they're going to be talking about evangelization and some general principles and some of their experiences with college youth and what they're doing today. They're a young married couple, have 2 kids, and we're really excited to have them here. Doug, good
Father,
to see you.
You too.
You got some big stuff coming up, don't you?
Yeah, it's a big announcement to anybody out there, especially in the California area. I'll be going out to California on November 9th. For 5 days, I'm putting on a Battle Ready Rally tour, series of 5 different locations: Covina, Hanford, Paso Robles, San Diego, and Madera. That's right, those 5 cities. You can go to our website, battlereadystrong.com, and check the event tab there and get the whole schedule lined up there. Going to be out there giving talks, and we'll have some prayers, some talks, some confessions, just rallying the troops to fight the spiritual fight. And everybody's got a battle. We're all fighting something. You know, the battle starts within ourselves, and we deal with things outside as well. So please, if you're in the California area, please check out battlereadystrong.com event page and come to one of those 5 locations and join us for some real rally the troop type prayer and conversation to wake us up to what's going on around here. So anybody else interested in Battle Ready rallies, check out our website, contact us. We're looking at South Texas and Louisiana right now, setting up some down there in the next month. So check it out and give us a call if you'd like to set some up in your area. battlereadystrong.com. Thanks,
right.
Father, for letting me mention that.
Yeah, I've got an announcement too. I want everybody to check out a blog called Power and Witness, www.powerandwitness.com, and it's a lot of videos I have uploaded of guests we had on the show and some other people just passing through EWTN here. So I like it. Got some good stuff.
Well, it is good stuff because, you know, periodically you've had me hold the camera for you while you're interviewing people, and I love it. You get the little camcorder, you pull it out, and you get some great off-the-cuff interviews with them. Right. So, yeah, it is a good blog site. Yeah. And you just got back from a trip, didn't you? I
did. Went to Footprints of St. Paul, did a pilgrimage through there, and I actually have a gift for you that I'm working on. It takes, I got to dress it up a little. Okay. But you'll like it, and you
kind of have that Holy Land glow about you.
Do I? But it was a good trip. It was a good trip.
Good.
We saw St. Paul, you know, where he was, and inspired by his missionary efforts, and it's with a great group and a great group of people. They're watching tonight. Hey, everybody! It was a good time, and real inspirational. You know, he was shipwrecked 4 times. Can you imagine that?
That's probably worse than getting stranded on the side of the road too, on the interstate.
Yeah, I was like, that's a whole new level. But you know, tomorrow is All Saints Day, and our Holy Father, Pope Francis, gave a reflection on the communion of saints, I should say, and he talked about kind of a biblical term. You know, when the Bible uses the term saints, it's talking about those who are baptized, you know, united in Christ, and he speaks about this new relationship we have with one another, being united with Christ through the sacraments especially. We're united to one another with a special bond. And he got my attention because he spoke about the necessity of this fraternity and how it can strengthen us. And he says, the experience of fraternal communion leads me to communion with God. Union among us leads to union with God. It leads us to this bond with God who is our Father. You know, I just spoke of it the other direction, that, you know, baptized into Christ unites us with one another. And he's also talking about the reciprocal direction of it, that when I experience friendship and fellowship down here, I'm experiencing love, and that helps me to believe and to experience God's love for me. And I just want to tell our young people, I mean, everybody, I guess, is aware of this, but it is so important to have good friendships, a good fellowship of believers. It strengthens us in our walk. And I know, Doug, you address this issue a lot about the individualism that our culture seems to breed in us.
All right. Well, and that's something, you know, when the Holy Father at World Youth Day talked about the culture of encounter. You know, I see a lot of the youth I work with, you walk into a confirmation retreat or any setting, and the cell phones, the smartphones are kind of very dominant for a lot of people. And it's very easy for us to get focused on our technology, on ourselves, and to become more isolated that way. And the Holy Father has been calling out to us to dispense with the throwaway culture, the way we treat each other, marginalize each other, and to really be more open to that culture of encounter, to really reaching out to one another. You know, put a handshake out there, look at someone in the eyes, say hello. And when you ask somebody how they're doing, expect to hear back how they're doing and be ready to listen how they're doing. And share with them one another and build that communion. Because, you know, it is, you know, Father, think about it. If it's hard for us to appreciate the communion of one another and our brotherhood here on earth, how much more difficult then to really understand or grasp the idea of a communion of saints with those who are already in the next world.
Right.
Yeah?
And I think, yeah, if I experience it here on earth, it's easier for me to believe that God really loves me.
Right.
And hopefully we get that in a very deep way from our families, how we grew up, but maybe there was something wounded there. We didn't get that in a very powerful way. Let me tell you what the Holy Father says. He says, our faith needs the support of others, especially in difficult moments. If we are united, our faith becomes stronger. How beautiful it is to support each other in the wonderful adventure of faith. I say this because the tendency to be closed and private has influenced the religious sphere as well. So much so that it often becomes difficult to ask for spiritual help from those who would share this Christian life with us. Who among us has not experienced insecurity, confusion, and even doubt on our journey of faith? We have all experienced this, myself as well. It is part of the journey of faith. It is part of our life. None of this should surprise us because we are human beings marked by fragility and limitations. And he talks about it's important to have the courage and the humility to open up to others, to ask for help, to ask for a helping hand. He says we form a great family. Every member is helped and sustained by the others. I love his humility. You know, the Pope, our Holy Father, is admitting his own struggles in this area and things, and that's just part of the human condition. Doesn't mean we're doing something wrong. You know, if we experience this frailty, that characterizes our lives as fallen, weak human beings. So he's saying us, you know, telling us to have courage, to rely on others, to ask for help, to give help, and to let that lead us to a deeper relationship with the Lord.
You know, Blessed Mother Teresa would say these are the types of things that just go with the territory.
Right.
Now, it goes with the territory, being a Christian, especially on a faith journey, is there's going to be those moments of dryness. You know, our Lord, you know, maybe pulls consolation from us once in a while to see what we'll do and where we'll go. And if we're ready to ask for help from others and we're ready to give help to others, so many more good things can happen.
Right.
You know, you can pick up the phone and call somebody, or you can ask them to come by or go have coffee or something, and you know they're going to be there for you, and you know you can be there for them. That's a communion right there, a brotherhood, you know, that's a solidarity that we need, that we're built for.
Yeah. And here at EWTN, we have a witness of others who come and share their faith with us, and it's such a beautiful thing. And tonight we have JonMarc and Theresa Grodi going to share their faith with us. We're going to take a break. I'll be back in just a moment. Welcome to Life on the Rock, and tonight our guest is JonMarc Grodi and Theresa. Welcome to the show, and we're here to talk about Marcus Grodi, right? Unpack his story. But
What's it like being the son of a great TV star named Marcus Grodi?
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
And you've been on the show, his show, right?
Yeah, we've been on there. I've made a few little appearances.
Yeah.
So.
I get asked about the journey home every time I go somewhere. They always ask me about the journey home. And not Life on the Rock, but journey home. But let's talk about your story. You all have done some young adult ministry. Can you tell us, fill that in for us? What kind of work have you done with young people?
Sure. Well, we both met at Bowling Green, which is where we did our studies. And I ended up there after a few different colleges, but my adult conversion, kind of hinged around kind of coming to understand what we mean by faith, and it's good to hear the Holy Father's words about faith at the beginning of the show. Coming to understand what we mean by those words and what faith really looks like. And so then moving into campus ministry when I made it to college, I was the president of the student group at our university, and I focused just a lot about at this secular university, just kind of listening a lot to the culture, listening a lot to the different people I came in contact with, trying to understand what they hear when they hear us talk about faith, and what are some of the breakdowns in language, some of the miscommunications that go on. How can we propose faith in a way that's I don't want to say propose it in a way that's attractive, because I think the faith, I think Christ is attractive, Christ is appealing. We don't need to make him appealing, but trying to figure out what's getting in the way of that. What maybe in our message, what something that maybe in a way that we're dumbing down the message, or maybe in something that we're adding to the message. In what ways are we preventing that appeal, the attractiveness of the person of Christ from coming through?
Right.
So yeah, I did some campus ministry there. And now
You've done some speaking?
Yeah, a little bit of speaking, a little bit of writing. I'm still studying. I'm working on my master's in philosophy. So
at Steubenville?
Yeah, I just started at Steubenville. Yeah.
And you all currently live in Steubenville, right? And you do some work for the Coming Home Network?
Yeah, I work full time. I'm the communications coordinator, so I work with a lot of their online outreach, and then on the side I do some development and strategy with a lot of with Catholic organizations about their web presence. How their online tools can fit in an authentic way in their ministry. So.
Right. And Theresa, you actually did work for the parish, right, at the university you were at?
Yeah, for a year, I was a campus missionary at Bowling Green State University, which is in Ohio. We find when we mention Bowling Green, there's a Bowling Green, Kentucky too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked for a year as a campus missionary and hired independently by the university parish. It was a wonderful year, and I was a cradle Catholic, and I was poorly catechized, and so after having my adult conversion, I was able to look at these students at Bowling Green. 60%, it's a state university, 60% check the box Catholic when they come there. And just being a cradle Catholic and knowing what it's like to just get the faith given to me inauthentically, being able to look and try to say how was I, what was I told, how can I help people understand, how can I listen, to the ways in which other people were poorly catechized, or how their misrepresentations of the church, and then how can I address that?
Right.
Yeah, 60% of that area, there's a lot of Catholics, but very few. We had rather small services and attendance at a lot of our events. So there was this question of there's such an identification with Catholicism, but what's the breakdown here? Why is there? Obviously, people want it, and even people who still feel some sort of sense of belonging to it. But what's the breakdown?
So you all are married about 3 years, 2 kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one is just a couple months old, right? So now JonMarc, I like your story. You had some interesting struggles, I guess we'd say, about the faith. How would you describe that? You talked about wanting to be assured of that you could really have a relationship with God.
Sure.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think they're interesting. I don't think they're uncommon, but as I approached college and entered into college for a number of years, I was struggling with, I think, a lot of the usual questions about God and the authenticity of Christ and a lot of that. But a lot of it, I think, boiled down for me to this question of when we talk about faith, when the Holy Father talks about faith or helping, having faith, you need to have more faith. We're praying for faith, or we're helping each other, supporting each other in having faith. What do we really mean by that? And for a lot of reasons, I think our students and people outside the church looking in, it's very easy to get a picture of faith that's very unattractive. And so in my experience as a student, I worried over time, I'm not sure exactly where I got all this from, but I worried that when we talk about faith, when I'm asked to have faith, I have this longing to really know God. I have this longing to have this crazy faith that I see in the saints. But is that really what the church is proposing as a possibility for me? Because you hear what the world says about faith, and you see the witness of a lot of Catholics and Christians, who their faith seems relegated to an hour on a Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You do begin to wonder, is the rest of that just lip service? I want to have this deep intimacy with Christ, but maybe that's asking too much. Maybe if I really start to scratch the surface on this, maybe what I'm going to find is that that's just wishful thinking.
You think maybe that comes a little bit maybe from your dad and his work, that you hear all these testimonies of this great relationship with God, and you were kind of wondering yourself if that's really possible? Or?
It might be, and in that sense it was a grace, because I think a lot of people never get about really asking the question.
Right.
So I wondered a lot about, when we talk about faith, are we just talking about a blind faith? Are we just talking about believing something that I'm not really convinced of? Are we just talking about trying to prove it to ourselves with reason? But when it comes down to it, am I going to be able to know God? Am I going to be able to come to know Christ,
right,
to be in relationship with Christ?
And I think that's true. That resonated with me when I heard you speak about that earlier. That oftentimes in the world today, faith is presented just as some totally blind leap, and you just believe or you don't, and there's like kind of no growth, there's no relationship, there's
right,
no real presence of God in your life.
Right.
But you've discovered that, and you mentioned adoration. That was a key fact for you.
Yeah. Well, and just to back up for a moment, I think I've kind of divided a lot of the reasons that people never really go there, never really ask that question. I mentioned we were talking earlier about there are kind of there's twin fears I think that people have. On the one hand, I think as I had, there's a worry that if I really scratch the surface of this, what I'm going to find is there's nothing really there. Mm-hmm. That really this is just the particular club that I and my family like. But when it comes to actually coming to know God and being in relationship, this is just skin deep. There's nothing really beyond there.
Right.
You just have to hope. You just have to.
Right.
It's a wager,
right,
And if you go into any philosophy 101 class, there'll be a Christian who will stand up in your class and basically tell the class, well, it's basically a wager.
You're talking about
Pascal's wager, yeah.
Describe that for us.
Well, so Pascal, and it's a very useful idea. Pascal proposed that if you really lay out all the pros and cons of belief, if God is real, if he's not real, the benefits that you could gain, the risks of not believing, that really all the risks and benefits point to just believing, just in case. And that's really useful to propose to someone who is at a certain place of maybe needing to be open to even questioning. But there's a problem if we misidentify with that idea with faith. Because giving into a wager is not faith.
Right.
You don't put faith in an idea. Right. Put faith in a person. When we talk about religious faith, we're talking about putting faith in a person, and so it's never just assent to an idea. It's never even something that we do. This was a big piece for me too. When I reading the Catechism and seeing the Catechism talk about faith as man's response to God. Well, if it's a response, it means it starts with God. I'm responding to something. Mm-hmm. I'm responding to His prompting, His grace. And when we look at the gospel, that's the example we see. We don't see people who have it all figured out. We also don't see people blindly leaping into something. We see people encountering a man
right,
who's like no other man they've ever met.
Right.
No one who meets Christ can go away quite unchanged. And it was the experience of Christ that these people, they put their faith in Him, right, faith in the person of Christ. And so you had that encounter in adoration? Yeah, I like adoration as an encounter for people because, again, talking about the fears that keep people away from it, I think a lot of it just comes down to not having the silence and the opportunity to really grapple with. Christ is either shockingly real and true in who He says He is, or He's not. It can't be anywhere in between. He can't just be a nice guy.
Right.
It's either the greatest scandal or the greatest, the greatest truth. And so, the great thing about something like adoration is it really brings silence into our modern lives, and kind of faces us with this. I like to call it the perilous question.
Right.
It can't be anywhere in between. I don't want to be Catholic if it's just a club. It's just a club
right,
that I like.
Right.
It's just the language and motions that I like.
Right.
I want to be Catholic if Christ is present in the sacraments.
And this is so important, what we're going to talk about later too, just how to evangelize, how to talk to people. And I like that image of we're not just inviting people to be part of our club, right? And as Doug mentioned, Pope Francis is talking about this culture of encounter. We're trying to lead people to encounter Jesus and to follow him. And yes, belong to the church, but it can get kind of shallow if it's just, do what I'm doing and come to my church and that kind of thing.
It can also be really intimidating when you think about trying to evangelize too, because if the task of evangelization is trying to convince people of an ideology, then that's an unenviable task because it's just no fun.
You think about it in the scriptures, right? He says, come and see.
Exactly.
Right? He calls people to come be with him, to walk with him. And I thought you all made a great point too, that if we think of like the parable of the prodigal son, how did the prodigal son show up on the doorstep? He didn't get his life together and come back to the Father's house. I mean, he showed up tattered, beaten, with the smell of pigs on him still. Yeah. And we come to the church and we experience the sacraments to be clean. It's the fellowship of believers, the preaching, whatever, all helps us to grow in holiness, to be converted. And a lot of people look at the church that way, say, I can't come to that because I'm not good enough, right? I can't do what you all are doing.
Yeah, and it's easy for us to, I love the prodigal son story because we see how low of a bar that God sets for us when we're mired in sin. And how easy it makes it for us to come back to him.
Right.
When we're in sin, we're wandering, he is always ready to just shower us with grace.
I like that because we personally in working with people can set the bar high. And we're just inviting people to come and see. Theresa, are some of these themes, was it true in your story as well, that JonMarc's talking about, and encountering the Lord and experiencing him in the church?
Yeah, because I was poorly catechized, I knew that God was real. We grew up poor, and God very clearly provided for us, so I knew there was a God, and I knew he was good. And so I wasn't experiencing it in the sacraments because for all I knew, sacraments were things in a book that you memorized, so you could receive your first communion or get confirmed, So I searched for God and I found him in magazines, like the New Age movement kind of, where say this spell, or light these candles or do this, and you'll have this experience of God. And so I really searched for God in natural religions, and I wouldn't put it in these terms back then, but that's what I was doing. I was very into trying to get an experience of God. Or
let me interrupt you. We're going to take a quick break because this is an exciting cliffhanger moment, and we hear the rest of Theresa's story when we come back, so don't go away.
Sounds like that's kind of where you were headed a little bit.
Hi, welcome back. And Doug is going to kick off this second
Well,
segment.
it's interesting because you started getting into this, Theresa, about the experience and such you were shooting for and looking for. And before we maybe unpack that a little more, I'm over here thinking, what are the conversations like in your house with the two of you? Because you're a philosopher.
I'm a philosopher married to a historian.
Yeah. So I mean, these conversations, because I know my wife and I have, really great and sometimes very lengthy conversations about this, that, and the other thing. The questioning this mystery and looking at this from this way. And but what's it got to be like for you guys? Just kind of tell the world what it's like to be a fly on the wall in your house.
Well, as I told you earlier, we learned early on that a lot of times if we're starting to have an argument, it's because I, as the philosopher, am thinking what ought to be, and she has a closer grasp on what is. And so,
And she doesn't forget, right?
No.
It's a historian. Right?
Yeah, well, we love talking about this stuff. We like discussing literature. We really like the works of C.S. Lewis. I think he has a real grasp on the culture. He was seeing a lot of this stuff coming beforehand. We love the C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy. That's a good book that I think modern students would enjoy.
Right. Now, Theresa, you were mired in the New Age movement. What got you out of that?
Yeah, I just want to mention that I think my whole idea of Catholicism would have changed had I ever seen someone adore the Blessed Sacrament in front of me, or even show it reverence. It was very clear to me that, like,
that's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're taught, it's like, well, this is Jesus's body, this is Jesus's blood. You know, but clearly it's bread and wine. You know, like
right.
we're taught in school symbols, and it's just like, oh, this is just another symbol. And I was even an altar server, you know, and I kind of think I just thought the priest was the most important you know, thing that was going on there.
You know, I tell this story in the parish when I was growing up. We used to have communion. Everybody come back to the pew and kneel, and then we'd all wait for the ciborium with the Blessed Sacrament to be brought back and reposed in the tabernacle. When the doors closed, we knelt. I mean, we sat down, and that communicated that reverence, that there was something special going on here, and that's so important for young people. We all need it, but it teaches something, doesn't it? Yeah. But so, what did get you out then of the?
Well, I was living a typical college lifestyle, moderate party. I was working as a bartender, which I don't regret. I loved it. Sometimes
the bartender part. That was a good.
Conversations are great, especially I had my conversion in the midst of bartending, and I continued bartending after.
She was a great evangelist, a great bartender evangelist after the fact.
They say don't talk about religion with people when they've been drinking. People want to talk about religion when they come to a bar to have a drink.
Interesting.
So I was kind of steeped in this lifestyle, and my fiance and I broke up, and I was sad. And my mother had this conversion and started going back to the sacraments, and she was going to adoration, and she kept trying to hand me this book on Mary, and I was like, oh, my life is whatever. I'll just take this book, and overnight, I mean, everything, I understood everything about Catholicism. It was rather miraculous.
Clicked all the stuff that you'd heard. Yeah.
Well, I didn't even know if it was all the stuff that I'd heard. I mean, at this point, I still didn't understand that Jesus was present in the Eucharist after 14 years of Catholic schooling. I didn't understand that. And so I had this conversion, and I knew the Catholic Church was the Catholic Church, you know, and I knew, and I just moved forward as a new Catholic. And sometimes when you have these cut and try conversions, you know, like I still worked at the bar, and I still went out with my friends, and eventually, you go out to the bar, who knows where you're going to end up, you know? And so my university campus offered confession every single day. So even though I was still doing these crazy things, I knew I had to go to confession. And so I kept going to confession, and I would show up to daily mass in my mini skirt and tank top, you know, and people very kindly put up with me, which was wonderful. But eventually with adoration too, we had this beautiful night of worship service where you could just sing and be very physically close to the Blessed Sacrament and just be vulnerable in front of God. The grace really wore me down, and I wanted to get rid of this sin in my life, and I didn't want to do those things anymore.
And that's a work of grace, right? To be dissatisfied with a sinful life. And well, let's talk about evangelization more now. I know when I asked you this question earlier, one of the first things you said, Theresa, was we have to learn how to listen. So we've had these experiences. We want to share it with others. And I know this frustration, because I remember when I first came to EWTN, everybody's talking about evangelization. And it's so great. How do you evangelize? And this one guy, remember, he said, well, become friends with the person first. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, when we say the new evangelization, you know, we throw that around a lot. But the reality is, within the new evangelization, is that we have baptized Christians, baptized Catholics, who think that they know what Christianity is, you know, based on the way that it's shown to them, you know, or what perceptions they've had in their own life. Yeah. and they either think, well, I want nothing to do with this, or they think, they get in this kind of mindset of like, oh, God will understand that I don't go to church, or God will understand that I love my boyfriend, or, like everybody kind of goes to heaven anyway, hell is for Hitler, or something like that.
Right.
And so these are the people who are evangelizing. They're not people who have never heard of Christ. They're people who think they know Christ and they don't want him, or they don't want what the church is teaching.
Right.
And so you have to listen, because everyone's different. Everyone got to that point some way. And if we jump to a conclusion, we hear one thing from them and we're like, we have to tell them the truth right now. It's not that we hide truth from them, but we need to learn how they got that way. We need to listen and really earn the right to be heard.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because people, sometimes we can feel the responsibility, I have to share Jesus with people, and I have to say this, and maybe we're answering questions that this person's not asking, so you have to listen to find out maybe their struggles or where they are, and form a friendship with them. And I think that's a great point about, are we a stumbling block, right, in this? And I know, JonMarc, you talk about being just trying to win an argument, or be on some kind of ego trip that I got the answer, you don't.
Yeah, this has been on my heart a lot lately, just this idea. I mean, we know that the truth is going to be a stumbling block to people, because it's the truth, So we have to expect that, and we can't take away from that. We can't tell less than the truth. But we always have to be careful of what we're adding to the truth. Again, like we talked about earlier, are we setting a higher bar than God himself would set for these people? In the story of the prodigal son, God, the father representing God, throws his arms wide to welcome the person back from a life of sin. And when we're evangelizing, we have to make sure that we're not trying to get people to jump through hoops that God's not trying to get them to jump through. So our flavor of Catholicism, or my liberal Catholicism, or my conservative Catholicism. No, we need to just give them Christ.
Because like the elder son and the prodigal son, right? Maybe he wants his brother to pay back the money or whatever, and and the father's not asking for that, right?
Yeah, God always. He sets a very low bar for us to get us started, to get us back home.
Yeah. You use the phrase that he just stumbled out of a pigsty. Right? We got to be open to that. I love that image. That we forget the concreteness that's presented in that parable, and where people are coming from. I know, Theresa, you also talk about how important it is to learn the faith, right? To study up on ourselves, and to have a full presentation of it, right, when we work with people. Yeah,
like JonMarc just mentioned, truth is attractive. Jesus told us himself that he is truth. So anytime we find truth, in the sciences or whatever discipline, we're coming closer to God, because God himself is truth. So one of the things that I know our particular campus ministry was really steeped in, and we learned really in depth, was the theology of the body. And the theology of the body is not just important because we look at our culture and we see how disordered sexuality has become, but also because the theology of the body talks about very primordial truths. It's of the body. We're all body and soul. Our body is going to be with us in heaven. Our body is important. The fact that we're incarnate is important. And there's so many things I live out in my daily life, in my marriage, just in daily life, that I learned from the theology of the body. And so,
well, if God is speaking to us through even the way that he made us as men and women, if we're ignoring that fact, then we're missing this key place where God teaches us about himself. And that's a big issue nowadays, especially where we have, this watering down of what it means to be man and woman. We're watering down this primordial spot, this primordial encounter, where God teaches us a little bit about his inner life, the inner life of the Trinity.
Yeah, the Catechism has such a beautiful section on creation and about man and woman being made in the image of God. And it talks about how each image some aspect of God differently, totally equal in dignity, but manifesting different perfections of God. Right. And if we're saying in our culture, hey, this is a completely fluid reality, I can just choose whatever I want, and there's nothing in our natures, that's missing this huge revelation of who God is, right? If they're saying there's nothing special about being a man or a woman. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. We were talking about dialogue and sort of meeting people where they're at. Tell us about that a little bit more. What are some of the errors we can make when speaking with people?
Sure. Well, one, and I do a little bit of work online, and so that's a new front for evangelization these days. And unfortunately, I think the medium of online communication really lends itself to some of our worst errors, our worst temptations to try to tell about the faith and invite people into faith in a way that's just very ineffective and very uncharitable.
Caustic sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing I've been thinking about lately, again, back to this idea of, what are we adding to this truth? How are we raising the bar higher than than God is in terms of this person coming to truth? It's really easy in dialogue, especially with online dialogue or debate, in a situation like that, in our pride, to forget that this argument is rather meaningless in eternity. This person admitting that I'm right doesn't mean anything. Right. That's not necessary for them to come to the truth. Right. And so I have to realize in this moment that doesn't mean much. And so if I'm kind of beating this person over the head with truth because I want them to admit that I'm right, or that I want them to see this exactly the way I see it, well, that's not necessarily what conversion means. That's not necessarily what God's put us there to offer this person. We certainly want to show them truth and get them to think about some things, get them to maybe see the church, Christ, the truth in a new way. But that doesn't always necessarily coincide with us feeling good, with us winning this little battle. Right. I think the best image of dialogue, of this kind of relationship we have to have with people who we're trying to bring to the truth is the cross. We have to meditate a lot on Christ in the stages of his passion. When they're asking him questions, when he's bringing truth to them, he's loving them, and in many stages of the journey, they're just spitting it back in his face, and they're sending him to die. And in those discussions, a lot of times, it takes a little bit of death to self, because sometimes we have to say, you know what, this argument doesn't matter, and I'm going to maybe show this person some other point, or I'm going to let the person win this argument and talk about, or affirm some piece that they were intrigued by that might lead them to the faith.
And I find like on airplanes and stuff, meet a lot of people just to get a conversation going and just get them to talk about, maybe some personal things about their life or whatever, and then maybe their experience with the faith, and get them talking, and then you can kind of maybe address things and maybe help to lead them to Christ. You talk about, I like this, we don't want to miss the softballs. Tell us about that.
Well, I think our good Holy Father has been, and all of the recent popes, they throw us a lot of softballs. Sometimes when the Pope says something that really strikes the world in a new way, and most likely the world is taking it in the wrong way, the media is taking it in the wrong way. But if the world has picked up on it, if it's been intrigued by something, well, part of it might be that some truth that they've been intrigued upon. So if the church says something about some sin in the world, or some issue that people are really concerned about. A lot of times the headlines are, the church has changed teaching, and the Pope Francis is going too easy on something. Right. And that may not be correct, but the fact that people are intrigued by his openness, intrigued by love, intrigued by understanding, and intrigued by a faith that somehow values them above even their sin, that they aren't their sin. There's so many ways that we have to be careful not to have a knee-jerk reaction in those moments and we have to come to the defense of the church. We have to correct errors, but I think sometimes we miss the opportunity in those moments to say, what's intriguing you about the church?
Right.
You're intrigued by Pope Francis, who's so full of love, even for those on the margins.
Right.
Let's talk about that more. Let's explore that, because that really is what Christ is about. That is the person of Christ.
Yeah, like why do you find Pope Francis to be a nice guy?
Yeah.
What do you like about him? Start with maybe a common thing. What about the issue, we hear this all the time, that you Christians are judgmental, and I'm starting to appreciate that more, I'm starting to see that a little more in us, How do you address that issue, Theresa, that I just feel so judged by you Christians that I don't want to be part of your group there?
Well, I'm a rather prideful person, so I would get defensive. But I just think, just listening again, So this may or may not answer your question, but sometimes when particularly I'm encountering someone online, like Facebook, I love Facebook. I think it has lots of great qualities, but a lot of times you get yourself into a situation where you're having an argument in public, you know, and you want to be right because you want the church to be right in other people's eyes. And sometimes just taking someone aside, on Facebook aside, you know, and having a private conversation between them and just saying like, sorry, I'm going to stop, you know, doing this publicly, and I want to discuss with you, you know, what do you think, you know, really bring it back to the person and help them be listened to, you know, because I mean, that's what I want when I'm having a problem, you know, when I have a hurt, when I have an issue with something, you know, I want someone to hear me, you know, I definitely don't want someone to talk at me.
Right.
It's I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just come at them with a bunch of rules, and without any experience of Christ or relationship, how can we change? If I just hit them with a bunch of rules.
Yeah, it's not that the rules aren't important, but you're picking your battle that day. You know, like, where am I going to start with this person? Am I going to start by loving them, or am I going to start by, you know, listing the creed to them? And it's clear, and we had talked about this before, it's clear who we are and what we believe. We never shirk away from what we believe. You know, and we have you know, you're Catholic. You know very well that we don't use contraception. We don't believe in sex outside of marriage. You know, you know all the issues because in the media what we believe. You know, so there's no shirking away from what I believe, but it's also not, you need to believe this right now or you're going to hell. You know, like, let's talk. You know, like let's experience the love of Christ together. You know, let's something I've done a couple of times with particularly people who are searching outside of religion, outside of Christianity. Is just invited them to come, because people say, I wish I could ask God these questions. I wish I could ask Jesus these questions. You know, like, why weren't I born 2,000 years ago and I could have asked these questions? You know, and just invite them to go to the church and say, this is what I believe as a Catholic. I believe that God, you know, who became incarnate and is now seated at the right hand of the Father, ascended into heaven, is sitting in that little box that we have behind the altar. You know, go, you know, at a quiet time when there's nothing going on there, and just go and tell God your problems. You know, tell him that you dislike that this is happening in the world, and why do you let this happen? You know, why, you know, talk to him. If he's not there, then you feel silly for about 30 seconds. If he is there,
give him a chance.
You know, like, we know that the grace is there for the sheer fact that they go there and like make that actual act of, you know, trying. You know.
I know, Doug, you had a question for our two evangelists here.
Well, yeah. How did you two meet? I mean, to kind of change gears here a little bit. You know, we know a little bit of your background. You come from a family where your father's been this, you know, missionary work through Coming Home Network, the Journey Home, and you had this past that was a little on the rough side and a little bit on the New Age side. When did you two get together? How did that happen, and what did that look like? I'm sure someone out there watching or listening right now is wondering, well, how did they meet and get to this point?
Yeah, well, we met in the amongst the campus ministry events going on at Bowling Green, and
so you weren't seeking God at the bar.
No, I wasn't.
She was bartender.
But he definitely came to the bar quite a bit.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah, I used to show up. Well, after we started dating, I used to show up with my philosophy books, and on a Friday night, waiting for her to get off, and I'd sit there in the bar and be underlining my passages, you know, in the midst of this. You know, it was a great opportunity for evangelization.
First time I saw him was at one of our college Catholic meetings. And I saw him in the back, and he looked kind of timid, and I thought, well, I better go talk to him, or he might leave the Catholic faith. This might be the only meeting he comes to.
And you know what? It worked.
Yeah, but my grandma watched EWTN, as everyone's grandma, when you're in college. I never, you know, from the time of my conversion, I never lived anywhere where I could actually get EWTN. But she knew who his dad was, and she had it in her mind that we were meant to be. Why, Theresa, would you ever, God rest her soul. Everybody pray for my relatives. But she knew for sure. Way before we did. Well, way before I did.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you all, we have just a few minutes left, but about marriage. I know we always talk about encountering Jesus and the Eucharist, confession, His Word. Tell us about marriage. You've been married 3 years. you're on fire for the faith. How has marriage helped you to find the Lord in a deeper way?
Well, I think it really brought home something I had been grappling with for a while, but was just that, and I guess this relates to evangelization too. Keeping in mind, the nature of persons, that when we're talking about evangelization, we're talking about other people, with their own wants and needs and baggage. What we can really do to reach out to them only goes so far. We can't if we're evangelizing, we can't control the outcome. We can go so far in making sure that what we can do, our actions, our words, our example, the prayers that we give for that person are as good as possible. But beyond that, if we're worried about something beyond that, then we're kind of going beyond our bounds, because we can't do anything beyond that. And then,
so marriage has made you realize that.
Well, marriage has made me realize that I can, as we were preparing for marriage and we're discerning and worrying about some issues and just some of the difficulties of being married, I know that I can trust in God that if love is not a feeling. Love, I can will the best for my partner, for my wife. I can be responsible for my own soul, for reaching out to her, for loving her as best as possible. And that's not always, again, dependent on these feelings. Some days, even when I'm not feeling it, I can still do it.
Right.
I can still do the responsibilities and duties that God's given to me. And then through that, He works both on us as well as the other people.
Right.
A lot of times it's when we step past that, when we try to get too concerned about changing the other person or converting the other person or getting this person into the faith or getting my wife to be the way I want her to be. That's when we get in the way of grace.
Now, Theresa, you talk about the tangible grace of marriage. Tell me about that a little. You mentioned that.
Well, we had been preparing for marriage. Like I said, we were steeped in theology of the body, so very exciting getting ready for marriage, and we wanted to do everything right. But something I was just so shocked at is, as soon as we got married, I felt the grace of it. And it made me think about how when you do what the church asks, when you do what God wants, there's all kinds of reasons, like, why can't we use contraception? Why can't we have sex outside of marriage? Can't we even do this outside of marriage? Like all these questions that you get from people. But it's like when you do it the way, you do it with obedience.
Right.
Yeah.
The fruits are incredible.
Yeah, there's the rightness and wrongness of it, but there's such grace in also just the act of obedience.
I could never even want to do anything wrong, to disorder our marriage, because the fruits are just so incredible.
You talk about how it's a special, we got 30 seconds, but that's just a special image of God, this new life and the sacrifice and giving to one another. That's beautiful, beautiful witness. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah,
and Doug, you wanted to give a shout out.
Yeah, quick hello to my mother who's recovering right now from an accident early in the week. Mom, if you're watching right now, I love you. God bless you. Praying for you and asking anybody else listening and watching right now to please say just a quick prayer for my mother. And I'll see you tomorrow.
All right.
Love you, Mom.
Well, may our Heavenly Father shine His face upon you. May He give you His peace. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week.